Okay. Hey everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Keegan Johnson, the Green Seattle Partnership Workshop Coordinator. And I want to start by thanking the Duwamish Tribal Chairwoman, Cecilia Hansen, for hosting and welcoming us all here today at the Duwamish Longcastle Cultural Center. It is a great privilege to be welcomed by you and the Duwamish tribe, so thank you very much. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we make our lives here on Duwamish and Coast Salish land. I want to acknowledge and honor the Duwamish people, Seattle's first people, who are still here, who have stewarded this place for thousands of years before settlement. Additionally, I want to thank all the presenters we'll hear from today. Ken Workman, James Rasmussen, Jacob de Guzman, and Sharon Leishman. Who will be sharing stories and knowledge about the Duwamish tribe and land acknowledgement with us. I also want to thank everyone who helped make this event possible. It was definitely not a small effort, as you can see by the size of the crowd here, and I appreciate all the support that went into this event, especially from the Green Seattle Partnership and the Duwamish tribe. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for joining us here today to learn about the Duwamish tribe. It is amazing to see the amount of interest that this event has garnered. I encourage you all to continue supporting the Duwamish tribe by donating, advocating, or just by starting a conversation with someone about the Duwamish and their history here in Seattle. The Duwamish people, Seattle's first people, have stewarded and preserved this land for thousands of years. Many of us make our lives here on Duwamish and Coast Salish land, and we owe much to its first people. Today, the Green Seattle Partnership contributes to this mission of stewardship by caring for our urban forests. Through its Forest Steward program, of which I am a proud member at Woodland Park in North Seattle, the Green Seattle Partnership promotes forest restoration and community engagement through hands-on volunteerism. Earlier this month, the Green Seattle Partnership hosted its 14th annual Green Seattle Day, where over 1,000 volunteers, led by forest stewards in 17 parks, planted over 9,000 native plants to help make healthier forests here in Seattle that will become the building blocks for healthy forests in years to come. If you'd like to learn more about the Green Seattle Partnership, come find me after the event. I'd love to tell you more about it. This workshop, the reason why we're here today, is an opportunity for us as community members invested in the health and well-being of the natural environment that we inhabit, to learn from its first caretakers and acknowledge the original stewards of the land that have come to love, that we have come to love and make our lives on. As residents of Western Washington and modern-day stewards of this land, it is critical that we recognize and acknowledge the land we are restoring, as the Duwamish tribe have been stewards since time immemorial. An act of land acknowledgement is a powerful way of showing respect and honor to Indigenous people's history and culture. And I'm thrilled that we have all the opportunity to learn more about Seattle's first people today from our four amazing speakers. So, today's workshop will start with Ken Workman, a Duwamish tribal member who will speak about the Duwamish tribe's history in the Salish Sea region. Then, James Rasmussen, a Duwamish tribal member, will discuss the Duwamish tribe's relationship with Seattle's land and the Duwamish River over time. Followed by Jacob de Guzman, a Seattle Parks and Recreation naturalist, will present on the importance of land acknowledgement as a non-native person here in Seattle. And finally, Sharon Leishman from the Duwamish Live Coalition and Jacob de Guzman will lead two tours, one on native plants and the other focusing on Duwamish River's history regarding restoration and salmon. The tours will take place around and outside the Longhouse. The tours will conclude the workshop. We hope each of you will learn a lot today and that you'll take the time to provide feedback and an evaluation of your experience by filling out a brief survey at the end of the workshop. We'll have them for you by the sign-in table. And speaking of sign-ins, please make sure to sign up. It's really important that we gauge community interest and participation as we can keep hosting workshops like this for the Green Seattle Partnership in the future. And then a few final workshop logistics. The bathrooms are through the doors there, as well as some water next to them. And the emergency exits are out the front door, and I believe there's one right here through the kitchen. So if we need them, they're over there. Okay, well, I don't want to hold this workshop back anymore. I'm really excited to get this started. So with that said, everyone please welcome Duwamish tribal member Ken Workman.
Generally in our native language, we always start out with something like this. It simply means a long time ago. Atulia tuha kadishipad, dacho hari, kalil atzatit Okitida Adishapad Hari Ka Duwas Ka Atzatiftabu Shak At the Stolak Odila de Stolak At the Hibash Stolak At the Hachu Ka Atzatiftabu Dacho Hari Asla Hill Mi man, atas it tabtua sanya, adisha ogul. A long time ago on this land, there used to be many, many people. On the Duwamish River, on the Black River, on this lake that is called Lake Washington today, Hachu. And we are all the people that live here forever and ever. And then we have stories. We have stories all through the Tuha. Dacho Heikwa Hali Haliku Ate Taspo Yate Sowilpo Heikwa Wali Ate Eslachel Ibasha Hoyada Ibasha Patas Yap Aslachel Okiti da skoj slatute, dice ogoda ashod put. And what I just said right there was a long time ago, down here on the Duwamish River, at street address 112, where Cecil Moses Park is right now, is our North Wind Weir site, where we as Duwamish people have stories about a great war. Thus, it's cold, cold wind was fighting with the storm wind, son of Chinook wind and Beaver Lady. Great war happened. And on that day, the cold was beaten back. And this big ice dam broke. And onto the river today, when the tide goes out, you can see the results of that ice dam and these massive boulders that come up out of the water twice a day. They rise and they go away with the tide. And so this is our story of who we are and how long we've been here. And so the story hasn't ended, it's an everlasting story. And I can tell you this, the part that's not published in any books. And this part happened about 5 years ago, when a small movie company was making a film. And they said, Ken, we would like to talk to you. And I said, okay, let's go down to this footbridge over the Duwamish River at the North Wind Weir site. It was a nice summerish kind of day. It's the time of year when the crows fly, flocks of crows fly. And the sun was setting down in the west. And in the North Wind Weir story, there's a part of it that talks about crows and grandma sitting on the hill. The hill is White Center today. And what the crows did to grandma back in those days when it was cold and icy. And so there I am standing on this footbridge, and the sun is going down, and I'm waiting to meet with my friends from Tall First Cinema. And dang if those crows didn't come back. They came down, a massive flock of crows came down from the direction from the west, the direction of White Center. They swooped over the trees and then dropped onto the river about 600 feet south of me. And then they banked hard north, coming straight for me while I'm standing on this footbridge 20 feet above the Duwamish River with these massive rocks exposed, and they had been drying out in the afternoon sun. These crows, they then came at me. They flew up over my head, and they flared out, and they dropped onto those rocks. And if I didn't utter a few expletives and said, those darn crows are still here. So the story of the Duwamish is an old story. And the story continues today. And so, Seattle has changed a lot in the last, well, I want to say 168 years. When it was Chief Seattle, my great-great-great-great-grandfather stood on the beach right over here. And he said to these strangers, he said, Flalil de Siaya Adisha Pagat Duwas. Flalil means come ashore. Come ashore, my friends, onto this land of the Duwamish. Gui. And this word, it means invite. So that was when he invited people, these new strangers, to come here. And then everything's changed. Doko sta aslahyo. Everything changed up till today. And it continues to change. We as people lived in the Garden of Eden right here. We had 92 longhouses along this river, the great village down at Renton. It's right behind Fred Meyer if you want to go down and just walk around. And then up and down Lake Washington. So if you want to know about the Duwamish, just follow the water. It's the watershed. It's over in Lake Sammamish, how it drains into the upper part of Lake Washington, and the creeks, and Swamp Creek, and Thornton Creek, and all the creeks that flow in to Lake Washington. And then they drain down through the Black. And the Black is where the massive houses were. And you'll hear about that in a little bit from one of the descendants of that village, James Rasmussen, right here. And so this is who we are. My house is right here, just down the street, 1,000 feet, to Alton. It's called Heron House. This would be my great, lots of greats in there. Grandma Oyo, Duwamish woman, from right here. And then Chief Seattle comes from Tsutsuka, the big house. This is where his father Schwab comes from. And he paddled right up this river. And so when we're sitting in this place right here, this is an ancient site that my five greats in there, grandfather, paddled right around this bend. It's one of the last spots on the lower Duwamish that's original. And so when I'm out there standing on that bank, I can see the ghosts as they come up and down that river. And then as I travel up north, I travel down south, further on the Duwamish, where the original Duwamish continues to wind. Those same people are still there. And so the world has changed for us as Duwamish people. We recognize that. But we also recognize who we are. And we're part of all of this stuff, all of the world that's around you. And so I'd like to share with you a little thing that my grandfather, when I say grandfather, Chief Seattle said, when he was getting ready to sign away all of this land. Many other chiefs and sub-chiefs were part of this treaty of 1855, the Point Elliott Treaty. He just happened to be the first signatory on there. And so what he said to Isaac Stevens, the governor at that time, who has this piece of paper, my grandfather said, I will take this paper and we will take it to our people, we will review it, we will get back to you. Of course, I'm speaking in English and it sounds really nice. But he probably said it was quite a te halasta te atatitel guasasaido laba te halasta ya ibash racista te paste guasasai our decision. So that's what it would have sounded like in the shoot scene. And so when we're talking about English and we're talking about this Chinook language that was a medium language for this interpretation of this treaty, there's great confusion going on. So what my grandfather said was the very first thing that we require is unencumbered access to our burial grounds. And so where you are today, this is all part of it. This entire green belt that sits behind you It's all part of it, and it's still here. It's one of the original parts in Seattle. I suspect it's been logged once. I can't verify that it's been logged twice. And that we had village, I said 1,000 feet down the street. It's on maps, 1894 map. And so, as people, we've been living and dying here for a long, 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 long time. And in all that time, we've taken our people that have passed, te yayala, that means the ancient ones that have passed. We take them to these places and we bury them, very much like a cemetery. And so grandma and grandpa and aunties and uncles and all manner of relatives, they go back down into the ground because this is the cycle of life. And everybody knew this up until maybe 100 years ago. It seems like people forgot. We have to kind of bang them alongside the head. And then he said, you abandon your dead and you think they're powerless. But they're not entirely powerless. And how the ground is more loving to our feet than it is to yours. So if you can imagine this as Duwamish people running around here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years with no shoes, and living no different than bear and deer and elk and eagle and salmon and everything, berries, everything. This is just how it was. This is just how you lived. And when it rained, you got wet. And when it snowed, you got cold. When it was hot, yeah, it was hot. So this is just the way of the world. And so he also said, the ground is more loving. Oh, yeah. Then he said, when the streets are empty and the lights are out, they will throng with the ghosts of my people. And finally he said the hills and the valleys and even the rocks will resonate with the memories of our people. So when you take all of this and you put it in the context of modern science, then you realize what he was saying. And I'm going to tangent off right here, just a little bit so you understand what I'm talking about when I say operations engineering. But I really like my job at Boeing Tool Engineering because that's where you get to play the big things. I'm retired from the Duwamish Tribal Council. I'm retired as a president of a nonprofit. So life is a lot less stressful for me these days. And I'm allowed to come in and speak like this because as people, as Native people, we weren't always allowed to do that. In places like this, in our house, it's easier where we can stand up here and just talk. But it wasn't always that way, where we had to hide in the shadows and we weren't allowed to speak in our own way. So it's an honor for me to be able to come here and talk to you in this way today. And to let you know that when you take all of this stuff that my grandfather was talking about 164 years ago, when he's getting ready to sign this treaty, he was talking about how, in this cycle of life, how all of the material that was grandma and grandpa decays and it goes down into the ground. It goes down into these hills right here. It goes down into the hills right over there in Seattle. And then it gets drawn back up every springtime when the rains come. And the world comes alive again. All that stuff that was grandma and grandpa gets sucked back up into the trees to the roots. And if you want proof of this, just look up Dr. Susan Samard out of British Columbia, where she has studied this interaction of trees and mycorrhizal fungi and how trees are all talking to each other and they absorb all that stuff that's in the ground. And if you want to prove it to yourself, just grow a tomato plant, throw some stinky stuff in the soil, and then eat the tomato. So then when you take all of that stuff, you realize that the dead aren't entirely powerless. Because when these trees come alive again in the springtime and the leaves come out and they begin to make oxygen, that's simply grandma and grandpa doing their work. And we recognize that. And so when the berries come out, we see our relatives in those berries. because we recognize that everything that's down in the ground comes back up. And it just cycles over and over and over and over again. So you see, as we sit here with Cecile and James and I, what you're looking at is the reintroduction of our ancient people back into who we are today. We just happen to be alive with beating hearts and brains and mouths that just won't shut up. So then when he said that the ground is more loving to our feet than it is to yours, I want you to think about the elephants of the Serengeti who talk through their feet using ultra-low frequencies, ultra-long wave. And so these herds of elephants can communicate with each other across miles. And so this is who we are as Duwamish people when we walk around without shoes. That the very cells of our feet are in contact with this ground. And in the ground are 10,000 years of the bones of the Duwamish people. We're under the streets, we're under the parking lots, we're under your houses. We're out here in the hills. And so when he said when the lights are out, the streets are empty, they will throng with the ghosts of my people, I would challenge you to go down to downtown Seattle, or even some of the older houses around here that are 100 years old. But you can go into downtown Seattle, down at Pioneer Square, and look inside of some of those old buildings that were built in 1909. And they have massive timbers in there supporting the superstructure. A simple trigonomic function will tell you how old those trees had to be, minimum, to be in those buildings. And in those trees, which were harvested from around here, are the Duwamish DNA. And so everything he was talking about was true. The only part I haven't worked out yet is the memories in the hills and the rocks. I'm kind of working on it. I'm thinking it has to do with quantum physics. Slide a particle is away. Hey, we're working. And so as Duwamish people, this is who we are. We're just like you. We're just like everybody else. We just happen to be living in a place that's been occupied for a long time now, because my grandfather stood on the shore over there and he said, "La this ya disha bud." And I say, "Grandpa, what were you thinking?" So this is the story of the Duwamish, and this is who we are. And where you are, where you're sitting, is on an ancient site. And we know what these sites are. They're mapped out, but they're easy to spot once you understand how to read the hills. So right over here is a creek. It's Fuji Creek. And that creek in the summertime is kind of dry, but right now it's flowing really good. And so there's your freshwater source. And if you've lived here in Seattle long enough, you know that the water just pours out of these hills. And that's because about 6 feet under your feet right here is a layer of blue clay. And we can prove that because the city was over here digging a big trench a couple of years ago, replacing a water pipe, and sure enough, there's the blue clay. And you can see it when you're up here in the woods walking on this trail and you look at this big cliff. There's the blue clay. The blue clay is a very dense soil. So when the rains come, and the rains go through all this porous upper surface, it hits that blue clay and just runs. And it turns into springs that just pour out. And so fresh water was abundant all around this area. Even over in Bellevue, I was over at the private reserve yesterday. In Bellevue, where the springs are just everywhere. So this is the area that we lived in as Duwamish people, and this is the area where you are here today. And so this is the story that I wanted to share with you. And to say, which means, hey, thanks friends for driving on these really packed and crowded streets to get here to this place today. And I'd like to conclude with a thank you. It's important that we recognize the work that goes on. And Seattle is now an international city. But we have also so many, many Native people that live here. And so we say thank you in as many languages as we can. can. And so for the Tlingit tribe from Alaska, we say Duwamish, because this is their word for thank you. And when they hear this word, they know that they are welcome here. So we say Duwamish. And the Haida, who live just a few hundred miles south of the Tlingit, they use Hawa for their word. And there are many Haida here. Simpson, their neighbors, they use Deutsch. Vancouver Island and Richinal, they use Ego as their word for thank you. The Makah, they use this word as well. Port Townsend, Lower Elwha-Squalam use Hawas. Heiska. Heiska is the Lummi, and it's the Sanish tribe right on the U.S.-Canadian border. It's the island tribes, Samish. The island tribes. Right north is Cape. And so this word means thank you for the Snohomish and for the Tulalip. So when you hear her say, it's I am thanking my Tulalip friends for their heart. Right here it's Wadi. And so when you hear me say, us Wadi of Chud, Chud is me. Us means I'm in the state of saying something. What's something is thank you. And then I put something on the end, which was, my friends were driving on these crowded streets. Down on the Columbia River. Quiddy, oh yeah, that's Duwamish and Duwamish Snoqualmie tribes, as well as the Mokosh and the Puyallup and the Stilicho. So this is the word in the southern Lushootseed for thank you. Maasai for the Chinook who live on the mouth of the Columbia River out there by Astoria. And then Wapila Tonka. So if you're ever heading back north there in the Lakotas, just say Wapila Tonka and they go, oh, I know who you are. And if you manage to get out to Quebec or Toronto, just use Miigwech, because they all Tonkan and the Ojibwe, this is their word. So in all of these ways we say thank you. We thank you for the work that you do. We thank you for your warm hearts. For your hearts, your warm hearts, your great strength, and your minds for thinking. Thank you.
My name is James Rasmussen. That's a very good Indian name. Good, you're supposed to laugh. I'm not about that. I served on the Duwamish Tribal Council for about 30 years. Before me, my mother, Ann Rasmussen, served on that tribal council before me for about that same amount of time. And then before her, my grandfather, Myron Overacker, he started with the modern council in 1925. So not only am I a member of this tribe, but I've been part of the leadership for generations. It's something I'm very, very proud of. I always like following Mr. Workman, because one of the things that I like to tell everybody is really what he said was, we want you to get out of here. Give us our land back, please. That's what he said. I joke. The part of the moving on here and that type of thing, there's several things that we should cover. Number one, this longhouse. This is a shed-style longhouse. Now, our tribe had gable roof, just like regular houses are. We also had circular longhouses. And so they're all different types. But this is the most common. That's the reason we put this in. And this is a post and beam structure. See the posts, the beams across the top. And when you look at the timbers that are kind of spread out, this is exactly the way our walls were built. What they used to do was to tie the cedar planks to those posts. So the post and beam structure just held up the roof, not the walls. And although it's incredibly comfortable to sit on the side over here. The reason that we have those benches is because this is where we used to sleep in the morning. Benches were made. And then in a longhouse, you would have large mats that would hang down. And they would separate the longhouse into different apartments. And you'd have some people who would live over here, another family would live over here, and then you have a fire in the middle, which open ship. All the way down. Really important people live all the way down here, because it's the warmest place, right? And then the other people live next to the door, the coldest. We had a very stratified society. Highborns and slaves and all kinds of things. One of the things that was in our treaty is that we couldn't hold slaves anymore. Now, people might think that, well, that's a bad thing. But if you're a slave of the Duwamish tribe, you actually are treated really, really well. But the other part about this longhouse is that one of the things that we wanted to have, held on to for a long time, was a fire. And first of all, we realized the fire suppression system that would have to go into the longhouse would cost about $500,000. And then when we actually got to look at what the fire pit would actually look like something out of a ski launch. It was just kind of round and that kind of thing, and that's kind of fun. So, along with what we originally wanted was a dirt floor, because, as Ken says, this is, our feet on the ground. Well, the health department says, well, do you want to eat no more? Because you can't have a dirt floor and eat long. Well, that kind of took care of that. But because those things happen, all of a sudden this other idea was this floor. This floor is designed by Mary Lou Slaughter. Mary Lou is a master basket. Her baskets are in museums across the country as examples of Duwamish and of basketry, and things that she can do in baskets are something that is hard to find anymore. Being able to make a basket you can cook, it's a very difficult thing to do. She can. And a wonderful artist in her own way. Now, what we have here, and you're sitting on most of it, but that's okay. I can describe it. On the outside, we have these designed kind of like triangle on either side, along either side, all the way up. Now, on this side, that represents Cascades. And on this side, that represents the Olympics. Those are the two mountain ranges that we're in between. And then the star, and this is how you do a star on a basket. This. That represents Duwamish people. We are the people on the inside, which means people on the inside of the inside, right? Not just inside Puget Sound, but inside Puget Sound. As Kenny described, all of the rivers and everything else. That's where our people live. We had a village site in LA Bay. We had a village site up by West Point. We had other village sites, but our main village sites were Renton and through that area. So that's what this star represents. But then she put a fern design going out in the middle on either side. More than likely, she was thinking to herself, well, it's a pretty design and kind of fills everything in just nicely. After we got done building this place, a lot of blessing ceremonies as we were going through the process, making sure we were doing the right thing. All of a sudden, we open up this place, and then we realize the power of it. And if you don't know it, if you're out in the woods, you guys need to go out. And you're stung by hell. Right? Affirm. Affirm is a healing thing. Affirm is something that's kind of like our northwest elevator. Because it'll work on burns, it'll work on cuts, it'll work on all kinds of things. This place is a healing place. That's what this part of that design means. And everyone is welcome. People that come here, we have people sometimes that will just come and sit because they can feel what's going on. They can feel our ancestors that are very happy. Now, wanted to get that out of the way. But one of the things that I also have been working on for well over 30 years is this river. And I don't care what the Coast Guard calls it. I don't care what anybody wants to call it because of different ways of people thinking about it. This is the Duwamish River. It is now from the Turning Basin in Tukwila all the way out to Harbor Island, 5 miles. Before, it was 15 miles. All of those bends and curves and things that you would see in a natural river, that is what was there. This last remaining part over here by Kellogg Island is a bend going around this way. And what Kellogg Island used to be was a place called Mud Island, which went all the way across almost over where the Rainier Brewery is. So the river actually split in two. And there were 2 ways to come into the river. Or to go out of it. Now, this area here was one of the largest mud flats on the West Coast. And the reason for that, and Ken brought it up, is we have blue clay down here. And where does that come from? Well, Mount Rainier has erupted before in the past. And when it does, the alluvial flows, you know what I mean by that, just stuff that comes down, came all the way down. And it's happened over and over and over. And we know that because we've done archaeological digs out here where geologists can actually tell, well, this was about several thousand years ago, this was several years before that, and they can actually figure out how long ago it was. And so, when I started down here, this is like in the 80s, I think. It's hard to remember these things now. But when I started down here, I started because I was working with a gentleman by the name of John Beal, who was restoring a creek down by South, which is called Ham Creek. And so he came to the tribal council, and he said, as I was a member of the tribal council at that time, and I was fairly new, and he came in and did a presentation. He says, this is kind of what I want to do with this creek. And since this is in your area, I think it might be council officer, somebody does a presentation, we tell them, why? We'll talk about it. So, John left. I'm sitting there and we're talking about, okay, what did you think about the presentation? And I thought, I said, this isn't. You know, I think this is something that, you know, we should be involved in. And then Cecile, in her wisdom and treachery, good, you do it. So, that started a long relationship with this movie. Back then, we were working on some restoration sites. I was part of the first river patrols that actually worked on this river. In the days when I was doing this a long, long time ago, spills were not accidents. They were intentional. That was just the way they did things, okay? This area was filled in, first of all, by everything, anything, anybody could just throw onto the mud flats. Because Seattle wanted to have an industrial area. Because that is the only way they're really going to be that big city that they want to be. And so, not only stuff from here, rubble from the San Francisco earthquake was brought up on ships as ballast and dumped out here. Garbage dumps were just created out here, just to start filling in all this stuff. And some of the first businesses that are here, such as Boeing Company, they started right down here. Now, the river itself has been straight. 1919, I believe, was when it was finally finished and straightened up. And so that it could be used as maritime, you know, and a navigable channel, you know, for bigger ships to be able to come in. That was really important to be able to create the industrial area back then. So when we look at this place today, still coming out of the watershed, it's a, you know, it's the Green River up there. If you look at some of the maps that we have, this area has changed immensely. It didn't used to be the Green River that came down here. It used to be the White River that came down. Because the white and the green actually came together at one point and then separated. And the White River and the Black River, where those two rivers met, is where the Duwamish River starts. Today it's the green, but it's still a river. The reason that I really want you to understand this is because it's a living thing. It is something that is surviving. It's surviving better now than it was. The spills that were intentional, people just didn't know. You know, dilution was a solution to pollution, right? Well, that doesn't fly anymore, right? And so, as we've been working on restoration sites on this river, helping get things started and all that type of stuff, we were very involved with Herring's House Park. We were very involved with T107. We were very involved with the Ham Creek restorations and other sites along this river, including an opportunity in the future to hopefully get Puget Creek opened back up into the river here instead of into a stormwater pipe that we should come back around to the river out of that stormwater pipe. But those are the type of things that I would work on. Yes, I did other things with the council as well. But with that, starting in 2001, way back in 2001, we already had an inkling that EPA had been looking at this book. And there have been many different studies and court cases and all kinds of things on how the shape of the river. And there were out-of-court settlements and all kinds of things that happened, which I was part of all of those groups and all of those studies and everything else. And as we came together in 2001, I was the representative from the Duwamish tribe that created the Duwamish River Cleanup, which was a coalition of nonprofits, people from Region Sound at that time, and Soundkeeper, and other nonprofits that were working on the river, were partners of ours, as well as the South Park Neighborhood Association, Georgetown Community Council. They were also on our coalition. And we came together and we formed the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. Now, the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition became, after a year, the Community Advisory Group to EPA. Now, that's an official role with EPA on a Superfund site. They call, they love just using letters. The cat. That's what they call it. So, with being this official group, we started working with the communities. Tribe, South Park and Georgetown, which South Park, almost half of the population is Hispanic. A growing population of Southeast Asian, Vietnamese, Hmong, and East Africa as well. Georgetown has a lot of the same issues because it's not like the bad thing. It's a very rich society. But when you're trying to do outreach into these communities, we have learned a lot of lessons over this 19 years that we've been doing this. And right away, we decided we need to do this differently. Number one, we don't want to go into the community because these community meetings that they have, they've been dealing with this problem for a long time. So we're not going to come in and tell you, hey, we have a problem and we're going to fix it. Because we know it's not going to be easy to do. Okay? So the first thing we need to do, and this is what we preach across the country today, go in, sit down, shut up, and listen. And that's the way we do our outreach. Every little thing we do, we start with that. And meaning we are working with the Vietnamese population. We are working with the Hmong population. We are working with the East African population. We're working with the Hispanic population. We have people from their own communities that are translators for them because they know them. And they get paid. Of course they do. I get paid for doing this work. Everybody from the Department of Ecology and EPA and everybody else, they're getting paid to do this work. Why should I expect an impacted community to just show up? No, people get paid. Now, when we have big public hearings and big public meetings, no, we're not paying everybody for that. But the translators, we always have food, and we have daycare or childcare. Because I can't expect somebody from the community to drop everything. Go get a babysitter? No. So we have all of those things. Now, when we look at it, of the community outreach, real quick, the Superfund site, or Superfund, by the way, there is no fun in the Superfund. It used to be funded by a small tax that was put on chemicals that they were finding in the contaminated sites. And so that tax created Superfund. And then during the Clinton administration, and I don't think it was Bill Clinton's idea, but the Republican Congress that he was dealing with, eliminated that tax. Which, Well, what they did by eliminating that tax was the polluter pay, which means industries have to pay. In our case, the first four possible responsible parties, this is the way we say it, possible responsible, was City of Seattle, King County, Port of Seattle, and the Bowen. They called themselves LUDWIG, the Lower Duwamish Waterway Group. Okay? And here we are, Community Advisory Group, the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. That's very intentional, okay? Because people, well, waterway, there's not a lot of songs about water. There are about rivers. And we've pretty much established that they call it that. So, when we are working through this process, it's a RIFS process. I'll just do this really lightly, really, so it won't hurt you, right? RI means remedial investigation. What's out there? How deep is it? What is it? Where is it? Everything else. Big, big investigation. FS, feasibility study. How many ways can this be cleaned up? From almost to everything, which we were kind of pissed off because if you're going to start with nothing, then you should go to everything. But then EPA said, well, we're not going to make them figure that out because we'll never make them do that. We're never going to make them do nothing. So, stay. But, so all of these different things come together. And this is years and years and years and years. City of Seattle, responsible. Storm drains, up and down here, including some CSOs that are City of Seattle, combined sewer. King County, most of the seven big CSOs are King County. And because of all that runoff coming into the river, well, that's being responsible. Port of Seattle, they own most of the property along the river. Probably responsible. Then, Boeing, oldest, biggest industry on the river. Probably responsible. They came together, and without them, honestly, this would be a very difficult process. Because they paid for all this. They paid for the study. Then, as EPA is running through this stuff early on, they realized, there's some places along this river that are so contaminated. We're finding out about it right now. We don't want to wait until we have a plan for the whole river. We want to clean those places up first. 7 early action zones. 7 community processes. 7 early actions or cleanups that as they went through the community process and heard the community's voice, all were strengthened as that process went. And we're really proud of that, because that's an accomplishment for us. Now that means that around half of the contamination has already been taken out of the river. Now we're going through the last process, which is the remedial design. And this is EPA talk, remedial, cleanup, okay? Remediate, remedial. EPA loves to just say something else when they need to just say it. So, we're going through the remedial design process. Part of that is the pre-design investigation, which means we've done a lot of studies. We know where a lot of this stuff is, but that was done 10 years ago. So let's do it again and really find out and make sure. We know this place is dirty, but how far out does it go? How deep does it? And those kind of things. So that's the process of going through. And right now, we're doing the QAP. Anybody know what a QAP is? Really? Do you know what a quality assurance production process? In other words, this is do this so that it works really well, right? And so that's coming out in the draft in 2 weeks. But here we are, DRCC, working with the community. And what we do is we've been through this process with EPA over and over and over again. 7 way it works usually is that responsible parties, we're on a plane, right? Okay. Boeing Company cleaned up around Boeing Plant 2, Port of Seattle, T-117. All of these different early action areas were led by one of those responsible parties. And as they go through the process, they work with EPA on a plan. And then when EPA thinks they've gotten the plan to a place where it's acceptable at least to them, then it goes out for comment. And that's when the community gets involved. Public hearings are done, and so community gets the voice. Well, by that time, most of these plans, somebody's been living with them for years. And when you start blowing holes to the plan, you go, wait a minute, it's not a bad plan. And we're saying, no, it's not a bad plan. It's a great starting place. That was not acceptable. And especially for this large final community. We had suggested to EPA that we do some kind of roundtable. It starts from the very beginning, that the community is at the table, and not just DRCC that represents these communities here, but if there's anybody else in the community that wants to be part of that, then they should be. And we will support them. We have a Duwamish Yacht Club as part of the table because they have an interest in what's going on. We have recreational users. We have community health advocates that are working on sending a message to the people who fish on this river. And yes, people do. And that's another story. But we're working through a process. And we were saying that at the very beginning, which has happened now many times with EPA. They started, we don't do things like that. We don't do things. And then all of a sudden they start working on a new community plan because the record of decision came out. And with that usually means they have to update the community plan. All of a sudden we start hearing from the EPA, well, we're thinking about this roundtable. What do you think? And we're going, sounds good. So they made that part of the new community involvement. So we have the roundtable that includes responsible parties, industries that are here, industries that are here that aren't responsible parties. And so everybody gets a chance to look at the process from the very beginning, which hopefully means we get to the end of the process, we'll all be happy. Now my scheme is get through this process, and if everybody at the round table agrees, maybe we can do a little bit more. Maybe we can do a little bit more. Because, monitoring a cat means you have to monitor it forever. How much is that going to cost? As opposed to, you already did it, get to a 0 level. So that's one of our schemes. And if we get everybody at that table to agree, or everybody that maybe one, such as the lower Duwamish likely group, then, because we also have the City of Seattle, King County, Port of Seattle, represented outside of their responsibility. So, the Port Division, King County Council, and the City Council are part of this process. And so if we actually make this work right, and we can go back to the council and say, the people that are working for you don't want to do this work. So maybe a good idea. Trees. Someday, you'll be able to fish in this river with not taking any more risk than you would take with fishing in Puget Sound. Rockfish, perch, clams, crab, squid. Oh man, there's all kinds of stuff. And that's the goal. Because just like Duwamish people that survived here, and we're still here, and one of the ways you can look at this Longhouse and Cultural Center, this was habitat made for us so that we might be able to thrive a little better. We have a run of wild everybody in that bathroom. And Carmen looked at her and she said, what do you mean? She says, well, these people that we met with, they don't have it. Everybody I know has asthma. That's not acceptable. So, the last part of the 3 parts of the River for All is also serving industries. We have not had a lot of investment in the industrial area down here for over 30 to 40 years because of the environmental conditions that are around. A bank is not going to want to loan a lot of money until we get something clean. And so that's the other part that needs to thrive. A river for all. This is not just an industrial river. We do things better. Close. I know you guys want to close. 2 things. The way I was raised with my grandfather, who still lived in the old house which I live in now. It was built in 1900 on property that was settled in the 1870s. Because my great grandmother, her Indian name was Quitz, married Abner Tuttle from Ohio, Civil War veteran. And we were able to stay in the city of Seattle. Because the first laws in the city of Seattle is that Indian people cannot own property. My grandfather taught me about cedar trees, about salmon, about eagles, about herring, about they are part of your family. On the same line that Ken was saying, they are part of my family. They are my aunties, my uncles, my cousins. And my great-grandparents are like the cedar tree. Because Duwamish tribe, or Duwamish people, we did everything with cedar. I mean, our canoes, our clothes, our baskets that we cooked in, our longhouses. I mean, we are cedar. So we are not in charge of anything. We are only parts. And as soon as hopefully we all can realize that fact, that we need to work with nature. Because it's like a big bear. This big earth of ours, it just wants to shake us off because we're making too much trouble. It can. And I don't think that would be a real good thing. We have to start thinking about what can we do to turn these things around. We are doing that. You are doing that. And that is incredibly important. And I, as Ken has, and everybody else, thank you. And what we do is we raise our hands. This is thank you. This is hello. This is goodbye. This is honoring you. Works for everything. We have a carving right out the front door that's doing this. Okay? And so that's what that means, and that's a thank you. But also, one last thing. This is home. This is home for me. And for a lot of you, not all of you, but for a lot of you, I cannot communicate what that means. 7 generations or whatever. It's not like, as Ken talked about, I used to own a store at Pioneer Square. My ancestors are there. I know they are. I know they're here. You know, it makes you be kind of a better person most of the time. Because they're watching you all the time. And you better, you know, do the right thing. At least most of it. So, however I can communicate that to you, you have moved into a very old house. It's important to learn the history of that old house and how to take care of it and how can we keep it going. Because I don't think we want to tear it down in this old house. Okay? Thank you. Keep doing the work that you're doing. It is important. Bringing more people in to do that work is even more important. And talking to people about that work that you do is also very, very important. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, I believe I'm up next. Hello, everyone. Hope I don't date myself being a person using a PowerPoint up here, but I will anyway. It's really amazing to see this room so full of people coming here with open hearts and open minds to learn more about the Duwamish tribe and the importance of land acknowledgement. So thank you for being here today. I want to start by saying, Maligayang pagbakting, bienvenidos, and welcome to this community learning workshop about the Duwamish tribe and the importance of land acknowledgement. So, I want to invite you all to join me in recognizing that here in Seattle and the Puget Sound region, we make our lives on indigenous, Duwamish, and Coast Salish land and water. And to honor these people who are still here, who are our co-workers, our neighbors, our friends, and members of our community, members of the community, and people who have served this land for thousands of years, this land that we all love, for thousands of years before its settlement, and will continue long after. I included some of these photos, and I think the most important thing about these photos is they're contemporary images of Coast Salish people. There's a force of work that shows photos in mainstream media of Native people that are either antiquated or stereotypical images, and it's a force that further erases Indigenous people from our history and their contributions. And one of my favorite contributions I learned of recently was the World War II code talkers who were imperative in our fight against Nazi fascism in Germany. Myself, my name is Jacob. I'm an environmental professional of Filipino and European descent, and so in my welcome, I welcomed you into the language of my ancestors, who I want to keep near and dear in my heart and mind as I talk about the importance of land acknowledgement. And as I live across this room, I also want to acknowledge all of our ancestors whose legacies we carry on to this day. I really can't express how incredibly honored and humbled I am to be speaking to you after these three incredibly important community leaders and also members of the Duwamish tribe. Can we honor them one more time with a round of applause? Okay, I want a little activity here, okay? So if you recognize this next climate activist, I want you to raise your hand. Right, a lot of hands, okay, beautiful. Okay, this is Greta Thunberg. We know a lot about her. She's a climate activist that started quitting attending school because of the stake of our future. And go ahead and raise your hand if you recognize this climate activist. Say we've got a couple hands, a few less hands, that's okay. This is Artemisa. She is from the Global Alliance for Territorial Communities of Indigenous Communities, and she was a representative of some of the deforestation, fighting the deforestation that's happening in Brazil. And then for this next one, if you recognize this activist, can we raise our hand? Okay, we see a few, but still less hands than the very first person. That's okay. This is Zu Martinez. He is one of the plaintiffs suing the US government for not protecting basically their life and liberty of future people against climate change, the climate crisis we're in right now. And all three of these activists spoke to over 6,000 people during the September 20th climate rally that just happened this year, but there seems to be an emerging trend, including myself, that we only recognize one of these people. I just got one more for you. You recognize this gentleman here, right? Some hands, okay, great. Don't be afraid, I know, John here. How about this climate activist? Got a few, all right. I'll be putting this amazing activist down the road. But what I think that sort of idea speaks to, that trend speaks to, is that Indigenous people have long been leaders at the forefront of environmental conservation since before there was the idea conceived of environmental conservation. Before the John Muirs, before the Rachel Carsons, before the Alda Leopolds, these folks were resisting development and conserving their land. Up in the top left here is Puyallup folks resisting the liquid natural gas plant down in Tacoma. And then on the bottom right here was my first introduction of working in solidarity with Native folks, Indigenous folks, and this is the Lummi tribe who successfully, with the community effort centered on the Lummi folks, resisted a Cherry Point coal export terminal, which would have been the largest coal export terminal on the western United States. It would have also been built on an aquatic reserve that was home to a lot of eelgrass, which is habitat for herring, which is connected to the salmon, which is connected to the orca, and ultimately ourselves. And in this picture, and it also would have been disturbing their ancient burial grounds, which is a violation of their treaty rights. But in this photo, they did a photo up here that they burned checks symbolically that said, "Not even for millions unlimited can you build this mega fossil fuel project." And this is our home, Seattle, or most of our homes, I assume, the Emerald City. It's a place we've all come to love for a variety of reasons, and the reason we're all here principally today is the stewardship of this land. And the reason we have access to this land is because of the 1855 Treaty of Point Elliott. It's a treaty that we greatly benefit from as non-Native people, and it's a treaty that's still not fully honored by the federal government. Both in relation to non-recognized tribes like the Duwamish, but also in relation to federally recognized tribes, in relation to like the Bold decision of 1974, which affirmed that tribal members of the Point Treaty, those folks were entitled to half of the fish catch, but how do we promise them, how do we give them one half of nothing when our fish populations are declining? And when we look at treaties, treaties along the US Constitution are known as the supreme law of the land. We think about the Treaty of Versailles that all these nations agreed to end World War I. It's the same kind of agreement between nations when it comes to the US government and our indigenous people. In my acknowledgement, I asked you all to join me in recognizing indigenous land and water. I've explicitly included water because water is an essential component to this land, to the ecology of this land, and is an essential component to all of life. When I got up this morning, I was kind of like, oh no, it's raining, but then I also realized like the rain is good, it keeps our plants watered. Right now there are salmon coming back to the streams, and so with more rain they have opportunity to get back into their streams to spawn. And you know, water is precious, right? Water is life. These aren't protesters, these are water protectors. Water is life. You know, our bodies are over 60% water, meaning that, you know, we are water, we need water. And something I learned that was really interesting when I was going to school is there's this thing in economics called the water diamond paradox. It's also called the paradox of value. And what it says is basically that even though water is essential to life, we treat it as if it has no value. On the other hand, when you look at something like diamonds, diamonds basically have zero utility for supporting human life, but we put this exorbitant value on diamonds. So I think for me that kind of begs the question: if I was in an inhospitable place, if you were in an inhospitable place, my goodness, would you rather have, and you were beginning to experience dehydration, would you rather have a bucket of water or a bucket of diamonds? And I think that sort of speaks to our issues with our relationship to land and water and our natural resources. This is one of my favorite pictures of the slide. As I mentioned, you know, water is a vital component to all things, all living things. But these are, the top left here is a photo of our major watersheds in the United States. And, you know, as Ken mentioned, as James mentioned, these are living systems. These are systems that purify the water, they purify the air, and they provide us with all the goods and services we use in our lives. Water supports the plants that make their lives in the watersheds. We think about the water cycle. You got a drop of water that started in the ocean, gets heated by the sun, turns into a gas, makes its way eastward, eventually runs into the mountains. In order for that air to go over the mountain, it has to condense and drop rain, which collects in our creeks, and eventually makes its way back to the river, where the cycle starts again. Or if you think about the life of a salmon, you know, salmon's born in a red, upstream, it hatches, rears in the creek for a little while, and eventually makes its way back down into the ocean, where it puts on 99% of its body mass. Then hopefully it will return one day, and as it makes its way up, hopefully avoiding predators, it will respawn, and that fish's body will fertilize the forests around it. It's shown that forests that have salmon in the streams, trees grow at 3 times the rate they do without salmon, and so it's really this clue that I think Western science is a couple thousand years late behind to show that, you know, salmon are vitally important to help our ecosystems, especially here on the West Coast, but also you can see the reasons why they're sacred. You know, indigenous people have been telling us for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and now we're finally getting to confirm it with Western science, which is a little bit late. A couple other points I would make is I learned from a Tulalip elder that indigenous people have a deeply spiritual relationship with their land and waters, that we are part of nature, and that we should live our lives in balance with all living things. Excuse me, I think I'm a little backed up here. I think, you know, in a lot of the environmental ethic that governs our economic system and some of, you know, the way we live our lives is that it says that we are separate from nature, and that nature is a force to be conquered, controlled, and dominated, and ultimately resources are here, animals are here for human use. And I don't think that's quite the case. So I wanted to include this quote by Philly Frick Jr. He recently just passed away, he rests in peace, but he tells us, "I don't believe in magic. I believe in the sun and the stars, the water, the tides, the floods, the owls, the hawks flying, the river running, the wind talking, because they're measurements. They tell us how healthy things are and how healthy we are, because we and they are the same. That's what I believe in." Now I say all of this as context for this next section. You know, why is acknowledgement important? I think there are seemingly obvious reasons why acknowledgement is important, and I think there are reasons that may not be so obvious. And I think one of those reasons is environmental justice. Understanding why acknowledgement is important sets the stage for all the other injustices that are part of our country's more sinister, often less told history. It is said there's no justice on stolen land. About Washington State history, we're not told that we live in a country that was founded on the genocide of indigenous peoples, the enslavement of Africans, the exploitation of labor, and the commodification of natural resources. Here in this photo we have sort of people of the West, settlers bringing light and development and things and driving out the buffalo and the indigenous folks. And, you know, I read that in a lot of, you know, as ways to kind of bring Native Americans to submission. They were slaughtering of the bison was a way to, you know, disrupt that ecosystem and ultimately suppress the Native American folks. And so I would say, you know, it's easy to feel guilt, or it's easy to feel emotions that are not so pleasant, but I would say don't despair, because despair doesn't get us very far. Despair only has utility to a certain point. If we educate ourselves on these past injustices, it will lead us to action, and I believe education and action are the antidote to despair. And although we've been far from perfect in our country's past, it takes strength and humility to recognize our mistakes, and it takes courage to recognize we have the power to influence positive change. I mentioned Winona LaDuke and when earlier points, but I want to read a quote from her, where she tells us, "One of the people in our Native community said the difference between white folks and Indians is that Indian people know they are oppressed, but don't feel powerless. White people don't feel oppressed, but feel powerless. Deconstruct that disempowerment. Part of the mythology that they've been teaching you is that you have no power. Power is not brute force or money. Power is in your spirit. Power is in your soul. It is what your ancestors, your old people, gave to you. Power is in the earth, and it is in your relationship to the earth." Another reason why I think acknowledgement is so important and necessary is that as we heal land, we can also begin to heal relationships if we center our land stewardship on acknowledgement and Indigenous people and Indigenous land. A lot of us in this room are GSP Forest stewards, and as environmental stewards, we're also land healers. As we center or set the tone of our restoration events with land acknowledgement, and that we're working to restore Indigenous land, we can add more depth and substance to the importance of environmental restoration. And so, from what events are we healing the land from? Now look at this photo. I'm going to take a second just to kind of observe it. Again, this talks about that sort of Anglo-Saxon nature as a force to be dominated and controlled. This is looked at as an accomplishment. And I think that we hope that one day our cedar trees will get this big and be this mighty. But I think, we are trying to heal the land from the commodification of nature, seeing it as something to be profited from, and that along with that commodification of nature, we have human greed, which is also a force we're trying to overcome. But when it comes to healing land and healing relationships, it's important to remember that we are social creatures, and relationships are everything. They're the foundation of community. And without functional, healthy relationships, we cannot have collective success, and we cannot have collective liberation. One of my final big points about the importance of acknowledgement, it's about recognizing our own humanity. At the end of the day, it's not so much about natives and settlers or descendants of settlers, which is ultimately an us and them mentality. It's about recognizing our own humanity and the humanity of other peoples. It's about seeing the humanity of Indigenous peoples, both locally and globally, and to understand that the system that oppresses them is one that we ultimately benefit from. I would ask, when we see people, do we choose to see them as human first, or do we see them as their race, their age, their culture, their gender, or their economic status first? This next part, we have these, a lot of this next part is based off this document that we have here in the back. We have a few, but they're going to be available on the GSP website, among other places. But this is a really amazing resource that came from the U.S. Department of Arts and Cultures, and it taught me a lot and really gave me the platform and the courage to be here in front of you today. So I'm going to go through and read a few really important lines that I pulled out and that are also part of this one-page document that we have here today. So it says, we launched this guide in the lead up to Indigenous Peoples Day 2017, when each of us is free to choose whether to accept and perpetuate a distorted history or stand for truth and reconciliation grounded in acknowledgement. And here in Seattle, we're fortunate enough to formally celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. And again, that was a movement that was led by urban Indigenous people here, including Matt Romney. In New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and among tribal nations in the US, it is commonplace, even policy, to open up events by acknowledging the traditional peoples of the land. This is a photo that I took during a tour of the Cedar River watershed. We had a really amazing guide, her name is Jordan, and she did an amazing decolonized approach to learning about where our drinking water comes from. We talked about what the name of the drinking water source is called, the settler name, but then we also talked, looking more holistically, looking at a larger timeline, what the original name of this place was, and that place is Nookanu. And it really took something that did have substance as far as our public good, but then really gave it a lot more depth and substance by talking about history here before 1855. In the introduction it says, acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way of showing respect and a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous people's history and culture and inviting and honoring the truth. Acknowledgement is an act of humility in recognizing our humanity. Acknowledgement is a critical public intervention, a necessary step toward honoring Native communities and enacting a much larger project of decolonization. The most powerful acknowledgements are those that are genuine and that come from a place of humility, I would argue. Acknowledgement is made meaningful through specific context and relationship. And the practice of formal welcome and acknowledgement of land is not new. It's a practice that's been done by indigenous peoples since before settlement. And acknowledgement is but a first step. There are some just kind of basic steps as you go through the guide. One of these steps is to identify. And so here in Seattle, when I give my acknowledgements, like I gave earlier this morning, I usually mention that we're on Duwamish and Coast Salish land and water. But places like this, there aren't delineations that exist. It doesn't like there are hard borders. Borders are a very modern invention. And so there are people from all different bands and tribes and nations who made their way all over this place. Step 2 looks like articulation. You formulate the beginning of an acknowledgement you'll share at the beginning of public gatherings. In my experience, it's not always easy in the beginning. It takes humility. I think I did a pretty alright job in this first one, but the first acknowledgements I gave, I definitely had, cracking voice and was trying to summon the courage in myself. And as I did them and as I formed relationships, it became easier and I think it became more authentic and genuine. So these are some kind of archetypes and sort of prompts you could plug in, but these are just some examples of easy ways to get started with formulating our own acknowledgement statements. And then step 3 would be to deliver. There's a danger that a practice like this becomes just another piece of protocol. That's something I have to be really aware about in my work. Another piece of protocol that's delivered flatly and falls on deaf ears. Acknowledgement should be approached not as a set of obligatory words to be rushed through. You can consider inviting a Native community member with which you have a relationship to give a welcome before yours. That these words should be offered with respect, grounded in authentic reflection, presence, and awareness. And we should consider our own place in the story of colonization and how we are a part of undoing its legacy here to live in a truly liberated multicultural society. And then beyond acknowledgement, as I mentioned, acknowledgement is just the beginning. Acknowledgement and the research required to do so with integrity should be an invitation to deeper analysis, deeper relation, and action. So some really easy first steps we can do is we can learn more. There's a wealth of information both on the internet, but I would say specifically here at the Duwamish Longhouse, to where we can learn more about the story here in Washington State and the story across our country. Build relationships, take action. I think one of the most important things to show that you want to keep things centered on indigenous culture and to do it authentically is to show up in service for people. Like I said, relationship building is the foundation for how we build community, and if we don't have those relationship builds, then we're kind of just asking for favors. And then another thing we do is spread the word. As I mentioned, we have power, right? We have so many people in our own communities. We have the ability to start conversations and have discourse, and the more we cultivate and take hold of our own power, the more we have the power to influence our friends, our community members, and our families. I'm going to conclude here with another final quote from Winona LaDuke. She says, "Let us be the ancestors our descendants will thank." So, thank you all for hearing me today. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate seeing you all here today and being part of this community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here. So now we have 2 tours led by Jacob, who will talk most of the native plants, and then Sharon Leishman in the back. We'll talk about the Duwamish River's restoration and how salmon plays a part of that. You're welcome to join. You're also welcome to hang out in the Longhouse, to go visit the gift shop or the area over there. Do as you please, and I encourage you to either follow Jacob or Sharon, who's in the back, to continue on. But thank you so much, and thank you to the presenters. One last time, thank you very much. Have a great day.
For folks interested in the tours coming on afterwards, if you want to meet sort of just kind of on the end of the walkway here in about 10 minutes, give you 10 minutes